Hello, Paradise Valley Unified School District, our great teachers, students, district administrators, parents, and community. My name is Julie Hill, McGraw-Hill Vice President.
And my name is Colleen Miller, McGraw-Hill District Manager.
Both of us are locally based here in Phoenix, albeit 6 feet apart, and we are proud members of the team at McGraw-Hill that we have serving the Paradise Valley Unified School District. Colleen?
Let me just start by saying that your social studies curriculum review is important to us. We have on deck 3 of our finest content specialists who will walk you through each of the grade bands requested by the district. Our goal is to give you a strong overview of the resources, both the national assets and those that we've designed specifically for Arizona.
We welcome you to enjoy the next 20 minutes, and we will see you at the conclusion.
Greetings, Paradise Valley. I'm Kevin Eddington with McGraw-Hill, and I'm truly honored and delighted to be able to share with you something so meaningful and special for us as a company in our flagship social studies learning platform, Networks. Now, a couple of things that make Networks incredibly special for you in your consideration, Paradise Valley, is in the fact that we built this program really with that C3 framework in mind. And so we want to provide you with a robust arsenal of resources that's really truly designed and most importantly impactful in terms of being able to get your students from point A to point B, all the while having rich conversations. Now, each and every person who's been successful and most importantly been an iconic figure in history, most importantly had a beginning or a starting point. Much in a very similar fashion in terms of looking at the young students that are on your screen right now, some of these young students that are in your classroom could ultimately grow up to be a key figure that we talk about for many generations to come. For instance, the young lady that's on your screen right now, does anybody know who she is? Maybe somebody answered correctly that this young lady on the left ultimately grew up to become Helen Keller. Let's try this one more time. This young man right over here on the left came from very humble backgrounds and beginnings. Anybody tell me who this is? Maybe some of you answered correctly in the fact that indeed grew up to be the great and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself. Other people, maybe a little bit more homegrown, organic, really in your own backyard in terms of some of your other success stories. Young man right over here on the left ultimately grew up to be that of John McCain. And then the next question becomes, who in your classroom are we ultimately going to be able to read about in our history books, hopefully from that of McGraw-Hill, in many future years and generations moving forward? At the end of the day, Paradise Valley, what we want to do with your students is we really want to be able to provide your students with a robust opportunity, a roadmap, so to speak, to really unpack this content. And at the end of the day, truly being able to grant access to this rich content for each and every one of your students in your backyard of that of Paradise Valley. Now, when we unpack this idea of granting access for each and every one of your students, we're going to do that a couple of different ways. One of the first ways we really want to unpack that access to the text is in the lens of how your students be able, at the baseline level, being able to access some of this rich content. Firstly, your students will be able to access all of this rich material, the readings, the research, through 2 main domains, print as well as what's found online. Now for you and most importantly for your students, there's going to be a synergistic sort of relationship between the two in the fact that everything that is print is certainly online. However, the online capabilities have a little bit more of an enhancement. Now your students will be able to access this on a Chromebook, on a laptop, on a device, but for even more mobility in the bottom right-hand corner of the page, you are able to access, and we'll be able to access for your students, the downloadable mobile app. And so for your students can have access to the text from the conveniences of their smartphone and or their tablet and still have access to the readings, whether they are around or away from an internet connection. Paradise Valley, to keep our conversation a little bit more linear, a little bit more structured, today I'm going to unpack granting access through a couple of different modalities during our session today. First, where we're able to talk about granting access for you and most importantly for your students is accessing the content. So let's start off there. Now, when we talk about accessing content, right up front, we want to talk about some readability issues for your students as well as engagement. For you teachers in Paradise Valley, In your teaching career, has anybody ever asked you, why do I need to know this? Or when am I ever going to use this? If any of you have ever tested to that, heard that once or twice in your teaching career, this very beginning of the student edition is really built around that idea of how do we grant access for your students. One of the first ways is talking about the story matters. Now, the story matters is really our attempt to build that bridge between yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Most importantly, taking the lofty skills of the standards, even those Arizona State standards I'm sure you're very concerned with, taking the lofty skills of those standards and translating it on down into student-friendly language so they have a better understanding, a better bridge between yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Other ways that we're also able to unpack this text for your students and really ground your students' attention in terms of unpacking what's incredibly important, first layer of granting access, is through the lens of our essential questions. Now, each and every one of our essential questions, Paradise Valley, is authored by our lead author, Jay McTighe, whose understanding by design, pattern, and pedagogy is seamlessly woven throughout the entire course of the text. What that means is that we're going to be working with the end in mind, starting off with these essential questions at the very beginning of the chapter, coming back to it at the lesson level, ultimately assessing on it at the very end. So there's a very clear roadmap in terms of where are we taking your students every single step of the way. And the same sort of experience found in print is also going to be mirrored with that online experience. So once again, nothing is ever lost in translation between print and or digital. If I had my student print book in front of me and I simply turned one page on over, I would be greeted with a 2-page spread, place, and time. And this is one of the great ways that we're able to ground your students' attention. In this instance, taking a look at the Americas, 1500 BC to AD 1600, grounding them in sort of the terrain, the terroir of what are we going to be covering over the next course of this chapter. Certainly, maybe a document-based question on the left-hand side of the page, a picture, an artifact, an article, your map, as well as your timeline down below to kind of show you exactly what's happening on the domestic front, but as well as other international events that are corresponding and colliding with whatever period that we're covering, in this instance in the Americas northward. When we take a look at the maps, does anybody in Paradise Valley have one of those old school atlases that you kind of pull down and kind of layered and make a lot of really funny noises when you pull it back up? Right? If anybody has any of those atlases in your rooms, the idea of our maps are certainly not static, but really built around that idea of those atlases, but most importantly, taking that atlas and moving it on over into the digital landscape that we feel most comfortable in. That map found online, but most importantly, when I open it up and click on it, I have a lot more freedom, flexibility, and mobility in terms of being able to move things around, make some commentary, open up different items. Certainly I can annotate it as well. So I can really sort of bring geography, really bring these maps to life. And that's one of the greatest hallmarks of network social studies, in the fact that we really have that opportunity to have a laser-like sort of scope on geography in your classroom as well. Beyond that, if I move on over into the lesson, looking at lesson 2, Life in the Americas, this is really how your students are going to access all of this rich content. One of the first questions I want to ask you once again, and thank you for your participation points, Paradise Valley, is how many of you all have struggling readers in your classes? If so, raise your hand. All right. Now I see I can imagine that a good majority of you probably are in that same boat, in that same camp, as I'm really in the trenches with you, is that I often had struggling readers in my classes. One of the things that I really want to point out to you when we talk about granting access is accessing that of readability. For your struggling readers, everything in that student edition page is really designed around how do we grant that access, unpack the readings, unpack the narratives for your students. So something as simple as single column text, so it's easier for your students to migrate throughout the entire courses of the passage, large headings at the top, coupled with smaller subheadings down below, ideal for Cornell style note taking, but also something incredibly small yet important is that every single page in social studies, in network social studies, was always going to finish on up with a period. When you take a look at the books, this is one of those, I dare you to compare. Open up any one of the books, turn to a page, you're going to notice every single page ends with a period. The reason why we do that at McGraw-Hill is that we don't want to sacrifice comprehension of a concept or an idea, translating it from one page to the next. That's our commitment to you and to your students to once again build out that idea of comprehension. Other ways we're also able to grant access in terms of unpacking things for your students who who might be struggling readers is, in that vein of a different series of tools underneath your student's tool belt, so to speak. Number one, that essential question, taking a look at, in this instance, what makes a culture unique? Seen at the very beginning of the chapter, but once again, now at the lesson level, to once again, give your students some more context. What am I looking for? How can I answer and how can I address it? Below that, it matters because a subset of the story matters at the very beginning of the chapter, but grounding it and isolating it in what's absolutely crucial for your students to understand here in Lesson 2, Life in the Americas. And then below that large overarching heading, the Maya, taking a look at the guiding questions. As a student, what am I looking for? Reading for meaning, reading for comprehension. What should I be answering and addressing as I navigate throughout the entire course of the reads? And down below that, you're also going to see towards the bottom of the page, the reading help desk. Each and every one of our lessons, Paradise Valley teachers, has its own separate graphic organizer. This graphic organizer is also digitized as well. So as an instructor, you can show this and display this whole group, whether in person, on your next Zoom call, as well as your students will also have access to this in their own student edition as well. That same sort of robust arsenal of reading supports is also going to be found online as well. So once again, there's a one-to-one kind of relationship between the print as well as the digital. When I further migrate throughout the entire course of my student edition, simply turning one page on over, once again, take a look at this 2-page spread. Notice how both pages are being punctuated with a period. Let's look at the side wrap margins in terms of connections to today. How do we build that bridge between yesterday, today, and tomorrow? These are the couple of different items that are going to be sprinkled throughout the entire course of the text in order to have your students have a deeper, richer understanding of not only the Maya, but as well as history in general. As your students are continuing to migrate throughout the entire course of the passages, you are going to note these reading progress checks. These items are designed to serve as almost standards speed bumps, if you will, slowing your students down, checking in with them to understand basic comprehension before they complete the rest of the actual lessons. Those same reading progress checks, teachers, have also been found automatically deposited into your online student edition, so your students will also have the opportunity to work through those type of questions in addition to notice the connections to today right down below as well. When we continue to turn the page on over, a couple of things I also want to point out to you in terms of the scope of the reading help desk is simply taking a look at vocabulary. How your students are going to be able to access vocabulary is absolutely crucial for their understanding of social studies. With regards to our help desk, we want to provide your students with an arsenal of resources that are designed to unpack vocab. And you're going to do that through 2 separate camps, either the academic vocabulary or content vocabulary. Most importantly, notice how we bold that term and put that definition in the side wrap margins for your students so they don't have to go to another outside resource so they can stay in the text longer. That same sort of resource has also been translated on over into our online experience as well to once again aid and boost your students' comprehension as they continue to stay in the passage to build that enduring understanding. Furthering on, as we migrate throughout the entire course of the passages, you'll also see things from time to time designed to help and illuminate and really bring key figures to life, whether it's biographies or other items that you might see from time to time called Thinking as a Historian, that really gives your students an opportunity to step into these rich cultures and into these rich histories as they migrate throughout the entire course of the passages. All the while taking advantage of different skills, maybe writing, critical thinking skills as illuminated on the page to once again get your students to that next level of thought as well as understanding. Once again, all these items that are found right over here, whether it's those biographies, the reading help desk items, those critical thinking skills, have certainly been deposited into that online experience.
It still feels like it's on top of the world, the realm of the gods. It's Machu Picchu. It's thought to have been built in the 1460s by the Inca god king Pachacuti Inca. Machu Picchu has about 200 buildings, was home to around 1,000 people. It's laid out with streets built on terraces cut into the mountainside.
Now, each and every one of our videos is going to be done either by the CBS and or BBC, so don't be thrown off by that British accent, but that is just a small example of our commitment to you and to your students in Paradise Valley of accessing high quality materials in order to help bring the skills and bring those readings to life. Now, when we bring the entire lesson cycle to a full and complete close, a couple of other things in the side wrap margins that are designed to really, once again, take your students' content levels to the next level. Whether it's the geography connection right over here in conjunction with the maps, as well as thinking as a historian or this lesson review. Every single one of our lessons is always going to be punctuated with a review questionnaire that is really going to check in with students. What have we covered up to this point? As well as it's going to escalate in Bloom's taxonomy, moving from basic vocabulary all the way through some sort of writing piece, in this instance, a narrative piece at the very end. And you'll notice that the writing strand in networks is incredibly strong with a heavy emphasis on expository writing. Students could easily answer this on a separate sheet of paper, but once again, in the era of distance or remote learning, those same questions have also been deposited online for your students to be able to take advantage of in the digital landscape in order to be able to submit and compose those items right back to you. With networks, there's a very consistent sort of layout or pattern throughout the entire course of the instruction. So if you understand one lesson, everything else builds upon that same exact sort of model for consistency for your students. In a nutshell, the best practice. How can your students really unpack all these items right over here? When we move on over into the very end of our chapters, there's going to be a series of activities for your students as well as an assessment. This, what you're going to find on the right-hand side of the screen, is going to be a practice assessment. This practice assessment is really designed to give your students a sort of self-check, almost quiz, to be reflective of their confidence level in case they're preparing for that chapter examination. But one key item that I do want to point out to you, Paradise Valley, is take a look at the very bottom of the page where it says need extra help. You're going to notice right down there that if you have, as a student, missed any of these questions, it's going to encourage you to go back to and review a series of different lessons that we've covered up to this point, just so you have even more confidence when you move on over into that actual examination. These sort of assessments right over here have also been deposited while your students are online as well. So there's nothing that's going to be lost in translation between the two. So a couple of different ways that we're able to, really grant access in terms of that content for your students. When we also talk about granting access for your students, we also need to talk about differentiation and differentiated instruction. How does McGraw-Hill's networks provide access for social studies for each and every one of your students? Let me show you how we're able to grant access for all of your students right now. Now, one of the things when we talk about granting access is that we also want to unpack the idea of inquiry for your students. And that's really one of the hallmarks of network social studies right now. As we built this with the C3 framework in mind, that trajectory of inquiry is really grounded throughout the entire course of our materials and our resources. One of the best ways we're able to unpack this inquiry arc is through the lens of what's known as our inquiry journal. This additional overlay material is really designed to serve as a catalyst in the lens of talking about inquiry in your classrooms. How it works is that it serves, like I said, as an overlay, and it really builds back upon that essential question. Same essential question that we saw a couple of moments ago in terms of the Americas, what makes a culture unique? We're going to build upon that right now in terms of that getting started. We want to provide some collaboration in your classrooms. So students, after looking at the essential question, have an opportunity to have some collaboration. Let's go ahead and talk about it. But below that, how do your students engage with asking their own questions back to the chapter? As we want to deposit in your classrooms the opportunity for your students to share their collective brilliance, but most importantly, answer any sort of questions that they might have about the chapter that we're unpacking and uncovering. In a nutshell, getting your students to think as if they're their own historians directly in your classrooms in Paradise Valley. When we move beyond just that initial first page, we're going to talk about and look at how do students engage with the text. In the upper left-hand corner, you are going to note in this general area right over here, a small thumbnail of that student edition, what we looked at a couple of moments ago. This here is designed for your students to lay on top of your existing student edition with a series of graphic organizers, culminating and walking your students through that C3 arc and trajectory and framework of open-ended inquiry, looking at a series of different history standards, explaining ideas, citing textual evidence right over here underneath part 3, and finally moving through the last component, which is that of summarizing, all the while looking at this graphic organizer and continuing to be grounded in the essential question found on the left-hand side of the page. Moving past your students' ability to engage with the page, now we just move into a different stratosphere of content in terms of looking at a series of additional primary sources. And this is really one of the things that sets McGraw-Hill's networks apart from any other social studies learning platform on the market right now, in terms of being able to grant access to an abundance of primary sources right there at your fingertips. In terms of taking a look at this artifact, once again, tied back to the lesson, but take a look at the adjacent facing page beyond that picture in terms of walking your students through analyzing, drawing conclusions, comparing before taking a look at another history skill set. Beyond just that simple picture, we'll next move on over into another primary source. In this instance, analyzing some of the work of Ponce de Leon right over here in terms of looking at this firsthand account, citing textual evidence, all the while enhancing my students' existing understanding of the text. At the very end of our inquiry journal, towards the latter part of the chapter, we really want to give your students an opportunity to come back to some of their items in terms of how can you report your findings? What did you find and uncover in your research as we navigate throughout the entire course of the chapter through this inquiry arc? Can you organize your thoughts? Can you write about it? And most importantly, how does this connect right back to the essential question? The very beginning sort of guiding light, that North Star that put us on our journey throughout the entire course of the chapter. As we bring everything to a full, complete close with that essential question, it's not only enough for me to just kind of pause right there, but most importantly, I want to deposit in your students the opportunity for them to have an impact, not only directly in the classroom, but most importantly, in the community around them, in the fact that there is automatically built out a citizenship project that is really designed to have that understanding, that work that they've done, giving them an opportunity to transform the community around them in some sort of service and or action project. Other ways we're able to grant access for each and every one of your students beyond that of that inquiry arc is through the lens of granting access for some of our struggling readers. Now, I asked you a couple of moments ago how many of you all had struggling readers in your classrooms, and it's something I'm sure you all could attest to. Another way that we're able to unpack the narratives for your students is known as our Reading Essential Study Guide. One key advantage of the Reading Essential Study Guide is it takes the same readings from your student edition, and most importantly, does this at every single lesson level. But most importantly, what it does is that it takes the ethos of that narrative and translates it 1 to 2 grade levels below. So it's a little bit easier for your students to be able to unpack that text. Certainly, these are not summaries by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of items that are really stripped down and most essential for your students to be able to understand. If you're joining me on the screen right now, take a look right over here as we're going to overlay Life in the Americas, Student Edition as is. In the left-hand side of the page, you are going to note this is the Reading Essential Study Guide. Same essential question. We have some guiding questions as well, a timeline, a time map for what's going on in the chapter, as well as what to know. Now, when I further move beyond that initial page, notice right over here, the heading of the Maya corresponds with each other. And here there's this larger emphasis on simple sentence structure versus compound or complex sentence structure as well. Sinkholes in both areas is one of those key vocabulary terms highlighted in both items right over there, but as well as we give your students the opportunity to mark or comment on the text right over here to once again reinforce your student annotation skills to once again build out that idea of annotations that increase student comprehension as well. And once again, if you want to laser in a little bit deeper on those, we're going to put those items side by side. Reading Essential Study Guide, 1 to 2 grade levels below, heavier emphasis on simple sentence structure versus compound or even complex sentence structure as well. This same sort of experience is also found online through McGraw-Hill's Question Mark or Reading Coach. So when I click on the Question Mark or the Reading Coach, both names are synonymous with each other and interchangeable, your students will have the opportunity to change the readability from on grade level to approaching. Teachers, you have to be able to assign this out to your students so you can give them that opportunity, but most importantly, they're in the driver's seat in terms of being able to shift that readability in the digital landscape as well. Now, once again, when we talk about granting access, we also need to talk about our more international students in the classrooms. What resources do you have for our Spanish speakers, you might be asking? Well, McGraw-Hill is really taking that into consideration. So something as simple, let's say my chapter summaries or my Reading Essential Study Guide have automatically been translated into Spanish to once again provide universal access for, like I said, your Spanish speakers in your classroom as well. The text is also available in Spanish when they are online, just to provide you with an idea and a notion that we are really on your side and on your student side in terms of being able to grant access to that content when they're online. Other ways we're also going to be able to grant access and unpack the readings for your students is through a dynamic McGraw-Hill only resource known as LearnSmart. Now, LearnSmart is a dynamic reading coach at the outset that I want to provide some sort of context for you all right now. We originally created this for our higher ed division, but it was so successful there that we actually translated it and moved it on down to high school as well as middle school level content as well. And so even though what's on your screen, I want to point out to you that your students are only going to be responsible for just what's highlighted on the page. Sometimes students get overwhelmed by the volume of text, and we want to sort of alleviate that. What LearnSmart does is that it highlights the most essential items your students need to know right here, right now. Just let's focus on this yellow highlight right now. We don't have to worry about everything else that's highlighted in gray. After my students do the readings for about 10 or 15 minutes, my students are going to, let me turn the page. After that, your students are going to be greeted with a series of questions. The questions right over here are designed to assist your students with basic comprehension, but as well as recalling their confidence level down below. Beyond that, we can also gain a whole lot of information in terms of taking a look at a series of most challenging learning objectives and laser back in on reteaching opportunities for your students. Right? Now, I've talked a lot about our students being able to access this content, but I haven't talked about somebody yet that's so incredibly important. And that's going to be you, the teacher. So teachers, how do I grant access for you all this afternoon with Networks? When you look at your teacher's edition, some of the things that are going to be called out for you is how do you make the reading sort of come to life with regards to a series of different skills at your fingertips, whether it's writing, critical thinking, visual skills that are designed to overlay that student edition. Those items have automatically been deposited into your pre-built lesson plans, which are customizable and editable, so you can really create a streamlined lesson plan that really sings to your existence in the classroom. Now, when I take a look at a series of different resources when I'm online in my teacher account, in my lesson plans, you're going to see resources such as my chapter projects, lesson vocabulary, critical thinking skills, and reading activities, as well as a series of different pictures, primary sources, and maps that really sort of round out that student experience. And once again, bringing the Americas, the Inca, the Maya to life, in addition to, like I said, those maps, as well as a series of comprehensive assessments. The assessments, we have a series of Blackline Masters right over here, in addition to traditional tests, as well as document-based DBQs right over here, which are so incredibly crucial for your students' understanding of the text. And many of those items have also been translated on over into Spanish, in addition to our online assessment center, in which all of those tests can be taken electronically for your students while they're online. The best part about that is that all of them will be auto-graded for you as well. And a series of just different tech-enhanced questions kind of move us in the vein of getting your students prepared for high-stakes examinations. Now, as we round out today's conversation, let's move into the last component, which is being able to grant access through the lens of technology for each and every one of your students. Students are going to have access to this content, like I said at the outset, either online, the desktop, Chromebook, as well as their tablet and or their smartphones, in addition to taking a look at that student edition while they're online with a robust arsenal of resources right there at your students' fingertips, in addition to just getting access to the student edition, as well as being able to take advantage of those online resources in which your students can be able to write on them, comment on them in ConnectEd, our platform, as well as that of Google Classroom at the same time too. Other ways we're able to enhance the conversations in your classroom is through our partnership with StudySync, your ELA curriculum at the middle school level, in which we have our Sync Blast. The Sync Blast are short informational text-based read-write activities that are authored every single school day that really give your students an opportunity to laser in on a key issue, a key figure in the arc of history through a quick poll questionnaire, some sort of vocabulary, as well as some comprehension at the very end, just to once again have some more conversation, some dialogue with key points that go above and beyond. Other ways we're able to have some conversations in your classroom is the lens of BTW, our current events blog, updated at least twice a week to give you a pulse on what's going on around the world and certainly what's going on in American electoral politics as well. Now, as we round out today's dialogue, taking a look at professional development, certainly there's an arsenal of PD already built in to Networks, but as well as we have a robust existing menu of items that we want to support you in from day one all the way throughout the entire lifetime of your adoption. I'm sure Julie, as well as Colleen, will be able to comment on this right now, and I'll put this in their more than capable hands. Take it away. Thank you so much, Paradise Valley, for your time and your attention and your consideration of networks as we grant access of this rich social studies content to you, and most importantly, for your students. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our McGraw-Hill content specialists. Colleen and I just wanted to conclude with two brief but important points. Number one, professional development is a standard at McGraw-Hill that we take very seriously. You have our firm commitment to constructing a plan with both remote and in-person strategies at the forefront. The teachers and students of Paradise Valley will be ready for success with McGraw-Hill Social Studies. And Colleen?
Number two, equity and inclusion are core values that we share. We understand and value the responsibility from our side of the partnership within the content itself, within accessibility standards, and in evolving learning environments. We are shoulder to shoulder in this important work.
So Paradise Valley, we want to thank you for your time and for your diligent review. We would be honored to earn your partnership and work with you with McGraw-Hill Social Studies. Thank you so much.